We are a UK-based organization with a presence here in Kenya and Kampala, and our work mainly revolves around the use of data to drive eradication of poverty. So we do a lot of research in so many areas, including how public resources are being used to drive eradication of poverty. So what we are presenting today is part of the work that we do, and this is an analysis of how county governments are investing on disaster risk reduction. So we are talking about DRR because, well, disasters affect everyone, but the poor are disproportionately affected, and that is because of their limited capacity to either cope, respond to, or recover from the impact of a disaster. So this analysis, we did it in 4 counties: Kisumu, Baringo, Laikipia, and West Pokot. The choice of these counties was because of their exposure to various hazards, but also because of the data that we had at the time. So one of the things we found is that these county governments are investing in disaster risk reduction both directly and indirectly. So directly is what we call the DRR principle. Like, for example, if you dig a borehole specifically for the purposes of helping a community to adapt to drought, that is a principal investment. But significant is an indirect investment. For example, if you construct a road, the main purpose for that construction is to enhance accessibility. But that road again can help when maybe there's flooding, to respond to or help people who are affected with the flooding. So if you look at how much the 4 counties are investing in DRR, Kisumu County invests around 5.9% of its total budget in disaster risk reduction. West Pokot invests around 9.9%, around 10%. Baringo, they do around 9.4% and 9.1% in Laikipia. So these are aggregates over 3 fiscal years from 2016-2017 to 2018-2019. The 4 counties invested a total of 6.4 billion in disaster risk reduction, and the county with the highest investment was Baringo at 1.9 billion. Then Kisumu and West Pokot had 1.7 billion each, but Laikipia had around 1.1 billion for the 3 fiscal years. So if you look at the composition of that investment, both the direct and the indirect, you can see much of the money goes to the indirect investments. Things like maybe improving the quality of roads such that if there's rains, they're not really destroyed. And then the direct investment takes the least part of the investments. So this part of the direct investment mostly goes into things like response, preparedness, disaster prevention and mitigation, while the indirect part goes into things like road rehabilitation or construction. So at the global level, we have what we call the Sendai framework. I don't know if you all know about it. So yeah, so it gives an overarching kind of a framework which countries and even some national governments can use as a guide to invest in disaster risk reduction. It has 4 priorities. Priority 1 is about understanding disaster risks. Then priority 2 is about disaster governance. Then priority 3 is about the investment in disaster risk reduction. And then priority 4 is about recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. So if you look at how the county governments invest along those 4 priorities, in Laikipia, much of attention is given to priority 2. Then priority 4. In Baringo, it's again priority 3. And then priority 4, which is about recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Then West Pokot is more about priority 3. And in Kisumu, it is priority 4 and priority 2. But then again, it's only in Kisumu that you find investment in priority 1, understanding disaster risk. The other issue which we found to be a huge challenge is data on vulnerability and data on the outcomes of the projects that county governments are investing in. Like, for example, if you dug a borehole somewhere, how many people are now resilient to drought as a result of that? That data is very difficult to come by, and it makes it very difficult for those who want to follow on accountability issues, but also to measure impact of public investments.
We do not recommend for counties, especially for a county like Baringo, where when that disaster becomes real, it is usually very serious. We do not recommend more mitigation. Yeah? And I think that's what you are calling the disaster risk reduction. So more about mitigation. Idea of disaster in Baringo is bordering on more on livelihood as opposed to what is defined as a disaster. Because you can have, during drought, 70% of the county being affected. So I think all their budgets should go towards mitigating this thing altogether.
When we launched this study in Kisumu, one of the feedback we're getting is that counties have very limited budgets. So instead of using it for mitigation, they use it for response. Which again is a bit of a challenge. Mitigation should be given priority.
Would you comment on national disaster risk preparedness and financial investments for disaster risk preparedness?
From what we've seen before, there's also always a problem with the preparedness part. We've seen droughts before, but still today they affect us. Same to flooding and all that. So there's still an area, there's still room for improvement, and of course financing are part and parcel of it. There must be adequate resources for us to be fully prepared for the disasters, but at the moment we haven't done that kind of analysis.
At the national level, we work with the NDOC, National Disaster Operations Center, and I know they're doing a lot of work at the moment, including they are drafting an action plan, because Sendai calls for an action plan, which includes every key player, every stakeholders, because disaster is cross-cutting, health, for example, you can bring agriculture, water, and everything. So what they're doing is drafting that action plan, which will bring on board every stakeholders towards improving or enhancing disaster preparedness in the country. And they've also designed a policy, disaster risk reduction policy. It's with at the Senate level, being debated. And the other proposal, I know they are working with a consultant to draft an act, a bill now, DRR bill, which will also be helping bridging some gaps that are there in the DRR. And they're talking about the action plan. One of the points there is how do we mobilize resources, financial resources, towards disaster preparedness, mitigation, and response to all these things. So the only thing I think they are not disseminating the information well, but a lot of work is going on at the moment, the NDOC.